Hey guys, my name is Paul Robinson, and here once again, being able to have an amazing conversation with some very esteemed panelists that we have joining us today, talking about mental health. We found ourselves in this pandemic, this COVID-19 pandemic that is affecting all of us on so many different levels. And one of the things that we wanted to be able to do was to actually talk through a topic that sometimes gets shied away from, but it's very significant, always significant, and it can hit us on many different levels. And so as we're finding ourselves in these unprecedented times, we thought that it would be very good and beneficial to have a conversation regarding mental health. So let's go ahead and jump into the conversation. Hope you guys enjoy. Take care.
I am coming from Louisiana State University in Baton Rouge, here in the swamp today. Just want to say hello and a little bit about myself. My background includes investigating crimes against children. My specialty area is sexual assault. And in addition to that, I've also been an elementary, middle, and high school counselor. And I've been a professor now for going on my 14th year. And my specialty area in academia is career and college readiness. So I love to talk to people about what they want to do with their life. And that's one of my interests with Construct Reach. Lots of opportunities in the construction industry, as I'm sure you hear Paul say a lot. And during this time with the coronavirus and people being at home, just want to talk a little bit today about what you can do to stay healthy as you're at home, mentally healthy, physically healthy, and just taking care of yourself all around. So holistic wellness. And just glad to be here today. So thank you so much, Paul, for inviting me.
Yes, thanks, Jennifer, for joining us. All right. And then next we've got Roberta Moore. Roberta is here in St. Louis with me. And so I'll let Roberta introduce herself and just kind of tell her journey as well.
Hi, Paul. Also, thank you for inviting me. This is fun. I've been looking forward to this. So I started out as a CPA in public accounting and did that for a number of years. And then I noticed that I was always much more interested, in the client's personal problems. When I was taking their tax return information down, they would sometimes talk to me about, oh, we might want a divorce or whatever, things like that. So I went back to school to get a degree in psychology, and I got a license as a psychotherapist. And 20 years ago in November, I started my own business with mostly seeing couples, but I also am trained in child-centered play therapy. So I did that too. And then along the way, I found out that if somebody was having, let's say, a communications issue with a family member or a loved one, I'd find out invariably after asking more questions that they might be having that same problem at work, because we can't split ourselves in two and be two different people in two different places. We are holistic beings. So then I looked for a way, how could I bring psychotherapy into the workplace ethically and without a stigma, because I felt that people needed it. Yeah. So I found the vehicle of emotional intelligence, and I branched off into also having an executive coaching practice, which is mostly about performance-based consulting. So that business is called the EQI Coach.
Right. Yes. Thank you, Roberta. And then we've got our third panelist. We've got Chris Brink, who's joining us from Minneapolis, Minnesota, with Ryan Companies. Thanks, Chris, for joining us.
Thank you, Paul. I'm excited to be a part of this panel. And I am a director of construction at Ryan Companies. We're a commercial real estate company, and we've got 16 different locations. And like Paul said, I'm in Minneapolis, and I kind of found my way into the construction industry through a job working at a bridge construction company after high school. I was thinking I really liked computers and might want to do computer science after high school, but I found that I was just loving construction through that bridge construction opportunity. And I just had an immense pride at being able to point at the things that we were building, the transformation that we were able to create through the construction process. And I still to this day point out some of those bridges to my family. And so I talked with the owner of that company, and he guided me towards civil engineering as a degree. I didn't know what civil engineering was, but I trusted him. And he knew that I liked math and science, and I was fortunate to get an internship with Ryan Companies about 16 years ago and work 30 to 40 hours a week through that internship to help pay for school and get my degree in civil engineering. I worked for 8 years as a civil engineer and diverted back towards the construction within Ryan Companies. So fortunately stayed at the same company and have worked on various project types, but have found recently that I really love working with the people within our company and with our customers. And so the director of construction role allows me to mentor 15 to 20 people through our construction projects. And then specific to the mental health topic, it's been a passion of mine between some personal things that have happened. A close friend that had committed suicide and some teenagers that we have brought in our house through a young life ministry, a Christian ministry that my wife is involved with, and just helping those people through some of their mental health struggles. But now mentoring people within the construction industry, I'm able to use some of those same things that I'm passionate about to help our team members in the same respect. So excited to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that is awesome, Chris. Yeah, thank you for joining us. And you know, when you think about the topics that we've had thus far, you know, we've talked about, and this is a common theme actually, you know, kind of how the COVID-19 pandemic is affecting the construction industry. We've talked about different career opportunities and different pathways that you can take within the construction industry. We talked about the future of construction. Next week, we'll be talking about virtual interviews and just different resume tips and things of that nature to how to really speak to your experience. But when you think about mental health, this is more on a serious note. And this is one of the things that we have been very intentional about, because sometimes, you know, regardless, and this is not industry specific actually, but, you know, regardless of what area of profession that you do have, or what area of interest that you do have, if you're not in the workforce yet, mental health is something that affects all of us. And so, you know, we thought that it would be very, very significant, especially during this time, for us to talk about such a serious topic that sometimes doesn't get enough light shed on it. And so, you know, hopefully you guys will find this beneficial. Hopefully it's time invested. Hopefully the content that we bring up and that we talk through as we're listening to, you know, people that have a direct experience with mental health, you know, professors, doctors, authors, right? And so, you know, hopefully this panel, which is very robust and has a lot of different experiences and coming at it from a lot of different angles, can be, you know, beneficial for you guys today. So once again, just want to say thank you guys before we get into it. So I'll kick this off, and you know, we wrapped up with the introductions with Chris, who is in the construction industry specifically, you know, being a director of construction. You know, since this has been a common theme that we've been talking about, Chris, how do you think this COVID-19 pandemic is impacting the construction industry per se?
Yeah, I think the construction industry has been impacted in many ways, but we are fortunate that we are able to be working on most of our project sites. So we are deemed essential in almost every location and able to work. And so we've really, a lot of the previous panelists have talked about some of the safety challenges with that. And that has to be the number one priority, to try to figure out how to work safely, between finding ways of practicing social distancing or distancing on our job sites, working to find ways of creating hand wash stations, and finding different methods of, when people come onto our job sites, asking a list of questions to make sure that they don't exhibit symptoms or they haven't been exposed to other people that may have the COVID-19. And so those are all common things that I think have been talked about on some of the previous panels. But a couple of innovative things that I've really been excited to see our company be a part of, and other people or other construction companies be a part of, is we've been able to build some modular kind of hospital spaces. And so we've taken some shipping containers, converted them into hospital spaces, and the first one went out last week to New York. And so that's really exciting, and I think it's something we're just going to see more of even after we work through COVID-19. So it's pretty innovative and exciting. And then we've got design and construction team members that are planning out some kind of alternative care centers. So either a hospital that is being used as something totally different, but thinking through how we could convert that into a care site for people with COVID-19, and just being ready, planning as much as we possibly can to convert those spaces. All of our 3D printers that we would usually use for printing buildings to show a finished product are being used right now to print face shields and face mask parts and things like that. So that's exciting. And then we're a little bit unique for a construction company in that we have a healthcare leader who's acting as a liaison within the state of Minnesota between the State Emergency Operations Center, the Department of Health, governor, and the healthcare companies around the state of Minnesota. And so he's working to kind of help guide the state's actions and also provide the resources that the hospitals need. And so there's a lot of innovative ways. Again, safety is number one. We have to make sure our people are safe. But beyond that, I think we're finding some pretty innovative ways and kind of going on offense to figure out how to beat COVID-19 and to work through this.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Just being able to, be a resource and provide, the specific things that are really needed during, actually a time of crisis for a lot of people. So that's good. One of the things that we always say is, when you think about a crisis creates an opportunity for us to sometimes, care for others more intentionally because the need becomes that much more amplified. And so we're able to actually meet a need, very specifically, more intentionally and more accurately. And so no, that's good what you guys are doing. This pandemic is traumatic, right? On a lot of different levels. And so let's see, one of these questions that I want to get into, is if COVID-19 has been traumatic, right, for some, what insights, and I'll let, Roberta or Jennifer take this, but, if it's been traumatic for some, like what insights do you have? What advice do you have, regarding, how this traumatic experience could have a toll on someone mentally?
Well, I'll go ahead and jump in. So, you're correct, Paul. My opinion is we're in what we might call a collective trauma. There isn't anybody who's not affected.
Yeah.
And trauma can be a scary word to some people. So I want to explain that there are two types of trauma. One we call big T. Big T trauma is like what happened with Chris's friend who committed suicide. I have a sister who committed suicide. That's a big T.
Yeah.
But we've got little t. Little t trauma is when something seems smaller, not as upsetting, but it's repeated. That's probably what we're in now. Unless you had somebody who died as a result of COVID, that would be big T.
Yeah.
But the rest of us who maybe are grieving, I have a student who's grieving that he can't have his graduation ceremony this year, and that's a valid reason to be sad or disappointed. Having that repeated every day for some amount of time with some uncertainty and anxiety thrown into the mix, that is considered trauma. Mm-hmm. And trauma in the present moment brings up any trauma that you've had in the past that's not been resolved yet. So in a way, if you can look at this as an opportunity, I can use myself as an example. I don't mind. I have PTSD. And I've been working, because I am a therapist, I've been a client consumer of therapy services for a while, and I will continue to be until I stop working as a therapist. So I might say I have a tendency to think I've worked on a lot, and there might not be unhealed trauma there. But I have learned during this time period, oh yes, there is, Roberta, because I've had memories of when my sister committed suicide and, things that were upsetting that happened in my family. Memories come up in my dreams and just listening to my clients. And then I say to myself, okay, Roberta, that's good. That's good that came up, because if you don't get this up and out from your unconscious to your conscious, then you can be sick. You can be sick physically, mentally, emotionally. So it's good to get things up and out, get them on the table and say, okay, maybe I have to journal about this, or maybe I have to talk to somebody about these memories. Does that kind of make sense, Paul? It's not necessarily a bad thing. You know, the stress itself is not bad. It's how we approach it.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
And
yeah.
you said something very important. There is what we call a tend and befriend approach to stress. You said that a moment ago about helping people, like Chris was explaining. So if you reach out and you help other people, you just check in to see how they're doing, or you help an older person get their groceries, you are then mitigating or minimizing the amount of stress on yourself. And you've helped the other person.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. You know, when you think about kind of how a lot of us have had to be quarantined and just kind of shelter in place, and you know, you mentioned where you know there are students. There's an entire graduation class, right, whose hopes and dreams have kind of been shattered, if you will. It's something that you really look forward to. I mean, it's a huge milestone. It's a huge marker in life to graduate, right? And you know, we have Jennifer on, who is pretty much boots on the ground. She's at LSU, and you know, she's in that environment. Jan, is there anything specifically that you're hearing how impactful of a situation this is for students, and how they're trying to navigate through this and remain positive?
Yeah, so we've had lots of different types of celebrations coming, and I think that's really important. So even if you're feeling sad or anxious or worried, you know, people are out right now looking for jobs as they're graduating. They're thinking about moving on to college, or maybe thinking maybe this isn't a good time to move on to college. So there's lots of different thoughts people are having, but it's also important to live in the moment. Yeah. And being in the moment means celebrating things that are happening right now. And high school graduation is one of those things, college graduation, birthdays are still happening. People are still getting married. So things are still happening that are worth life moments of people having babies. So all of those things are still going on, and it's still important to remember those. I have a neighbor who recently had a birthday, and they did put signs in the yard, and they had people drive by, honk horns, all that kind of thing all day long. Those are important things to celebrate. So remembering what is happening that's good is very important. Turn off the television, stop watching the news. You don't have to hear negative things all day. Saying to your friends, what good thing did you notice today? Yeah. Practice we have in our house is gratitudes. Every night we say our gratitudes to each other. So what are 3 things that you are grateful for today? And what happened, or what did you see, or something that, you know, and it can be anything. I have a 6-year-old, and sometimes he is just grateful for an insect that he saw that day. You know, that may not seem like a big thing to any of us, but it doesn't have to be a big thing. It might be a meal you had. It really can be anything. And remembering to be grateful to each other, somebody who prepared a meal for you. It can be having fresh water to drink. So creating that mindset in your home is important. Yeah. And that is something that we can all do for ourselves. These celebrations that we're starting to see right now, whether they're Zoom celebrations, creating a Zoom space, we're doing that for our graduates. One of the things we did was try to write down something special that we all remembered about that graduate and posting pictures of them. So that's something that you can do. I am a big encourager of having graduation ceremonies for people. You can certainly do that, and just celebrating those life moments. Don't let those go by just because they're not done the traditional way you would do them. Create a new tradition.
Yeah, no, that is very good. You know, one of the things that that has been very evident, you know, you kind of alluded to this, Jen, is, you know, having to just celebrate, you know, even though it's not under normal circumstances, not letting it go past without being celebrated and not being acknowledged. And when you have graduation, which is such a huge milestone, although you have to celebrate it different, it could actually create opportunities for others to be more creative and be more intentional with how we celebrate our graduates and how we encourage them and how we uplift them, which actually might be very good. You know what I'm saying? Like, because when we have the typical things in place, sometimes it kind of alleviates the creativity, and we don't have to think about certain things. We can just go through the motions because those are just set things that you do during a specific milestone. But when all of that is changed and now the onus is put back on, let's say, a parent or guardians or family members or loved ones, you know, to still celebrate their graduates, and we don't have the typical graduation to defer to allow the experience and the atmosphere to really just kind of do the part where we have to create that for them. I think, you know, when we spend some time really being intentional about that and being very creative, that could actually have, you know, a lasting impact, not in a negative way, but actually in a good way, because we are being very specific and intentional about the graduate and their life journey, their life experience, and we're pulling all of that into the context of this specific, you know, this particular moment where we're celebrating them and we're encouraging them and we're giving them hope to go on. So, you know, I just think that that is very important during this time to acknowledge. Yes, yes, yes. No, very, very, very good discussion. One of the things that I want to see, you know, so when you have, you know, because we've got different audiences, of course, that are watching this. We've got educators, we've got students. You know, but when you have an employer who's leaning in and being, you know, more intentional with their employees, Chris, is there anything that you guys are doing just collectively, kind of in-house with whether it's your field team or just your internal team, in response to this pandemic, and just kind of leaning in and being more intentional, maybe with a wellness program that was already in place, but you're kind of expounding on certain things now? Is there anything like that taking place?
Yeah, you touched on it a little bit there. We've had a pretty concerted effort to implement a wellness program and to make sure that our employees are comfortable talking about their mental health.
Yeah.
Construction historically has been an industry that you didn't talk about your emotions, and we're trying to break that stigma.
Yeah.
So we've been working on that for probably the last, I don't know, 3 or 5 years, to just break that stigma, to make it safe to talk about your mental health. And so each of our job sites has talks with the workers on the job sites to say, okay, here, you need to be comfortable talking about mental health. And we want to train everybody to recognize if somebody else is struggling with mental health. And so just trying to break that stigma and then make sure that people know where the resources are. And so when you get injured, if you have a physical injury, it's pretty easy to know where to go get help with that. But with mental health, it's a little bit of a mystery to people. And so just trying to call out those resources. So I'd say all of that was being worked on prior to COVID-19.
Yeah.
The few things that our leadership team has done through COVID-19 is, I think the biggest thing is communication. So our CEO acknowledges that our teams are probably working through some level of anxiety through all of this. The biggest question or problem we have right now is the unknown, and that raises the anxiety for our teams. And so our leadership team has been very intentional about communicating what they do know. There's a lot that we don't, and there's a lot that even our government leaders don't know, but at least communicate what you do know. At first it was communicating what COVID-19 means to us, and then what a shelter in place means to us. And now we're trying to figure out, what does it mean to go back into the workplace or back into a school, or for some of our incoming interns, they're wondering, do we still have a job? And we're trying to proactively communicate with them that, yep, you still have a job. Maybe there's some cases where we're trying to figure out how to reallocate them to a different project because of changing conditions. But the biggest thing through that is just making sure that we're communicating it and trying to eliminate as much of the unknown as possible. And then encouraging our team members, like Jen had said, to reach out to each other. I think Roberta had mentioned it too, but that communication, reach out to your team members, reach out to your friends and family, and just see how they're doing, and make sure that you're listening a lot to understand if they're struggling with any one particular form of mental health. And then the gratitude was mentioned. We had a day of gratitude where everybody wrote down what they were grateful for. And then we talked about the resources, just making sure everybody has resources available at their fingertips. And so trying to populate one location where everybody can go to find those resources.
Oh, that's good. That's good. You know, you said something early on, Chris, that made me think about the conversation actually that you and I were having, Roberta, just when we touched base prior to today. You know, talking about how traditionally, and we know that the industry of construction is traditionally, well, not traditionally, but it is, you know, kind of male dominated, if you will. I mean, there's a high percentage of males within the industry. I think it's only like 9% that's female. So you have an entire industry that's populated with males. And, you know, when you think about, you know, men, I know, Roberta, you touched on this and maybe you can expound on it, but sometimes we tend to like compartmentalize things.
Exactly.
And try not to let, you know, others in, or, you know, try to avoid situations where we have to be vulnerable at times. You know, but when you think about mental health, you know, I think you had mentioned some very good things regarding that. If you don't mind expounding on that, because it made me think about that when Chris was speaking about it.
Sure, it would be my pleasure, Paul.
Yeah.
So it's no secret. There's actually a book called Brain Sex, and it's about how men's brains and women's brains are hardwired differently. And then in addition, we're socialized differently many times. So men compartmentalize their feelings, one, because of how their brain's wired, but number two, if you've played sports, oftentimes, you know, your coach will be telling you, if you fall down and skin your knee and you're just a little kid, let's say you're, I don't know, 6 years old or something. If you're a little boy, come on, stop being a crybaby, pick yourself up, dust yourself off, get back in the game, you know, don't be a wuss. That's where men start learning to shove down and kind of detach, tune out from their feelings. You know, I have a client that I guess was a baseball player, and stories he tells me about his coach, they were almost borderline abusive. So then you grow up like that and you get adept at tuning out to your own emotional self-awareness. And then you go to work, you know, and right now I can tell from how Chris's company is, they're wanting you to be emotionally intelligent. What's emotional intelligence? It's the intersection of your head and your heart. So probably men are poised to think only with their heads. You know, maybe women are more heart oriented, but in emotional intelligence, we try to help people have the balance of speaking from both head and heart. And we have to men have to, that's a learnable skill. You could absolutely learn it. Anybody at any age, at any time, according to Dr. Ruben Baran's research, you know, but possibly men are not exactly adept at that because they haven't been acculturated that way. But there's 3 skills there's a couple EQ skills that can help you with that. One is your stress tolerance. So being able to make decisions quickly in the moment without getting flooded in your prefrontal cortex, you know, that you can make calm decisions. Your optimism, being able to see, like we've already talked about today, the bright side of things. Your empathy, being able to put yourself in someone else's shoes, see things from their point of view. You don't have to agree with them. You just have to be able to say, I acknowledge why you see it that way, you know. And then right now we kind of need flexibility, that ability to roll with the punches. So those are 4 skills that people could work on developing within themselves, and that would help with the integration of head and heart.
Oh, that is good. That's good. Good. So Jennifer, being an educator, right, and sometimes serving as that liaison, you know, between the students and their careers, you know, how could employers be more intentional as you see, you know, with Chris talking about kind of what they're doing and what they're doing with, you know, their employees, and how the CEO is really kind of leading that cause and really being an example of how to really navigate through that and allowing that to trickle down. As we have an entire kind of class or generation, right, that is being affected by this, but these are future adults that are going to be in the workforce. How can, from a young person's perspective, right, since you kind of have the closest relationship with them, how can employers be intentional about making sure that they take into account how young people have been affected coming into, right, their career?
Well, the first thing is, even if everything opens back up and, we get a vaccine and people are able to go into the workplace, that doesn't change the mental health effects of this, right? So those can be much longer lasting. People may have been exposed to harsh economic changes in their life. They may have been exposed to familial conditions that you're not aware of. So don't assume that because things go back to normal in a workplace that they've gone back to normal in a person's life. Yeah. That's the first thing I would caution people about. We know, I live here in Louisiana, the effects of Hurricane Katrina are still happening in Louisiana. So people can have long-term effects of trauma. And one of the things I would say is that you don't want to assume that people are functioning 100% all the time. If you're concerned about somebody, ask. I had a student recently who had not responded to emails from someone else, and that other person reached out to me and said, listen, I haven't heard back from this student. I'm really concerned. So I reached out, and the student did respond to me immediately because we have a really good relationship. Yeah. And the student's first response was to apologize. I'm so sorry. I dropped the ball on some things, and I've just been feeling overwhelmed. And I said, can I call you? Can we talk? Reach out. Listen, if you think that somebody might be hurting, make it a conversation. Don't assume that there's somebody who's dropping the ball because they don't care about their job or because they are blowing things off. Have a conversation about it. If you're worried, one thing that you can do, I know a lot of people say, well, I'm not a mental health expert. How would I know what's going on? If somebody tells you they're feeling anxious or they're feeling a little down, a little low, a little blue, one thing you can always ask is a scaling question. This is one of the easiest things an employer can ask. So on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the worst you've ever felt in terms of anxiety, 1 being the best. How bad is your anxiety right now today? And if a person says a 7, you can always say, what would it take for you to get to a 5 today? Okay, what would that take? And a lot of times people have it within themselves to tell you what it would take for them to get from a 7 to a 5. That most people do know what will help them. If they don't know, that's a good sign that they probably need some help, right? If they can say, I have no idea. Every day it seems to be getting worse. Every day I feel like I can't control my anxiety. That's when you know as an employer, this is a time that somebody probably needs an intervention of some sort, right? Or if they can identify a time that, or an incident when things started to seem like it was getting worse, that's a good indication they probably need some support and some help. A lot of times that we're seeing our students in particular are having more depression, more anxiety. They're under a lot of stress. And I hear parents say, how can they be that stressed about school? Schools are not like they were 20 years ago. They're very different. We put a lot of demands on students. So just want to caution people, if everything goes back to normal in the next 6 months, if everything goes back to normal the next year, it may not feel like it went back to normal for our students, for people transitioning into the workplace. There are lots of things you can do, but the first one is to ask if you can help and listen.
Yeah, no, that's very good. Well said, Jen. And you make a very good point. And in a sense, it's always been there, right? Where my normal isn't your normal. And being able to understand that, because people come from different contexts, people come from different communities, different vantage points, different life experiences. And when there is not an understanding or a desire to seek to understand the context of that person's life and what's normal for them, then we end up instead of building bridges at those points of differences, we build walls. And that could actually kind of increase just the emotional weight on a person as well, because they can't change where they come from. They can't change, how they grew up. They can't change some of those things. But, having an understanding could actually begin to create and chart a pathway to where, hey, my normal may not be yours, but now I'm seeking to understand it. Therefore, I can be more intentional about helping you become, successful in your career journey. And so I just think that, I think it's always been there, where there are these two different norms, whether you're an adult or whether you're a student or what have you. But being able to allow this, like you said, Roberta, kind of collective trauma, make us come out of this better, to where we remain more intentional and that we seek an understanding. Yeah, that's good. That's good. All right, this is a very good conversation today. Let's see. So I know typically about this time we like to kind of turn it over to our viewers out there if they have any questions. Let's see. Want to open it up to our viewers? See if they got some questions. All right. Okay. Let's see. We've got our panelists here. They are ready. If you guys have any questions out there.
No hard questions.
No
Only
hard
easy
questions. All righty. I promise the water's warm. You can jump in. Let's see if we have anything coming. Here's one that we have, for you, Chris, with young people. So I know you guys have talked about, making sure that you let your interns know that they still have a job. Maybe it's having to reposition them to another project per se. So collectively, though, with young people who are interested in the construction industry or maybe considering the industry, what advice do you have for young people right now?
I think finding an opportunity to experience it is the greatest way you can get involved in the construction industry, or to find out what it's all about. So I mentioned as in the bridge construction industry, and that was just initially something to help make me some money to pay for college, but it turned into just a passion of mine. And so I think experiencing it, and that kind of goes with any industry, but once you get a taste of it, I'm confident you'll love it. I think just the pride of seeing a building go up, or a bridge, or whatever you're working on from a construction standpoint, it's just amazing to be able to see that transformation.
Good.
All right, we have some from our live viewing audience. First question is, any websites that will be a good resource to help deal with mental health issues? What are some good websites and resources?
That's good.
Well, the APA, the American Psychological Association, has a lot of good things posted on their website. So does NAMI, National Association of Mental Health. I've seen things posted on their website. On my website, the EQI Coach, I've posted maybe six or seven short videos with some tips and tricks. So those are just a few offhand that I can think of.
Okay. And Roberta, you said NAMI. What's do you have the kind of the actual like
It's the
URL of that?
National Alliance of Mental.
NAMHI, probably.
Yeah.
NAMHI.
National Alliance on Mental Illness.
Gotcha. National Alliance on Mental Illness. Okay.
And I have a list that I'm sending to Paul at the end of this conversation with the website links. So like the National Suicide Hotline, just a bunch of different ones. So he'll have the links, and some of them have phone numbers.
Cool, great.
A follow-up question to Chris was, how did you go about reaching out to interns to communicate the message about them having a job? Was it a mass email or one-on-one communication?
I think the one-on-one communication is critical. They don't want to feel like a number. They're going to be an important part of our team. And so a phone call to them, I think, is best, just to have that one-on-one connection, and that gives you also an opportunity to hear some of their concerns or questions. This could be their first opportunity to have a job in any industry, professional industry. And so trying to just hear out what those questions are. Sometimes we forget the things that we didn't know when we were first entering the industry. It's even just things like, what should I plan on for the first day? Where should I park? What, some of those simple questions that we take for granted. So definitely reach out one-on-one. And then I'd also follow up, another way to just learn about the industry. You kind of threw a softball to me, Paul. I should have said the Construct Reach website, but that is an outstanding resource, and it has multiple contractors there that are ready to answer questions about the industry, and a lot of different connections based on different areas of the country. So wherever you're living, there's probably a resource for it on that website.
Next question is, what advice would you give educators to keep students connected to construction opportunities through COVID-19?
Oh, that's a good question.
Can you repeat the question?
All right, let's see. So, yeah, repeat it.
What advice would you give educators to keep students connected to construction opportunities through COVID-19 to keep them in pursuit of their goal?
Yeah, so what advice would you give students? What advice would you give, students? Educators.
To keep students connected to construction opportunities throughout COVID-19 so that they can continue their pursuit of their goal.
Oh yeah, that's a very good question. So what advice would you give educators to keep students connected to pursue their goals in construction?
I think a lot of that actually depends on where they are in the K-12 pipeline. So if they're middle schoolers, for example, or high schoolers, there's so many fun activities to do with middle schoolers. Occupational Outlook Handbook has all those videos that you can actually find the construction videos.
Yeah.
And if you want, Paul, I can actually include that in the links that I'm going to send you.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So or even on ONET, like they can look up different construction jobs. Occupational Outlook Handbook, though, has the videos, and those are really fun to watch. They're very short. There's lots of videos about different construction jobs, and they actually have information on the day-to-day work that a person does in those jobs, what type of training they would need, similar occupations. So that's a good way to have middle schoolers continue to look up these jobs. And since a lot of students are going to be transitioning from 8th to 9th grade and may need to choose a career technical education track or a college-bound track moving into high school, this is an important time for them to be looking at that kind of information, particularly if they're going into that 9th grade transition. Also, 9th and 10th graders sometimes have to make that transition to a track. If they're in 9th or 10th grade and they're going to be looking at apprenticeships, there's a lot of information about apprenticeships at the U.S. Bureau of Labor. I'm happy to send a link also to that, what an apprenticeship is, what is expected of an apprentice, how that's different from just any regular job, and the 5 different things about an apprenticeship that makes it U.S. Bureau of Labor registered apprenticeship. And there are registered apprenticeships in construction.
That's fantastic.
Very
so let's
good.
flip that around. So how should we be motivating ourselves? If I am pursuing opportunities within the industry, if I'm pursuing what's next, I know we talked about the collegiate path, maybe trade, apprenticeships, maybe you're getting ready to graduate from college and get ready to go into the industry. What are some ways that I can continue to be engaged so that I can continue, where I want to go, despite what's going on?
Well, and since I'm a career and college person, I'm not answering this, but I have been telling my students, a lot of the community colleges, technical colleges, and universities have their career centers open right now. They need to be interviewing. I actually have an interview sheet that has questions they can be answering, practicing their interviews. They need to be having their resumes updated. And those career centers often have counselors that are working even through this, so they can Zoom with them and have a mock interview. They can have somebody looking through their resume. They need to have that updated. And again, they can be looking through videos. What is it that they're going to be expected to know? Many of them are taking final exams right now, or whatever, but they need to be reaching out to people who can be references. And I always say, this seems like common sense, but really a lot of people don't know. You need to ask somebody ahead of time if they're going to be a reference. And if you do get an interview, make sure that you have talked to whoever's going to be a reference for you. And if they need to write a letter of recommendation, make sure that you know to send them the address of where they're going to send that letter of recommendation. All of those kinds of things seem like common sense, but a lot of people don't know how to get somebody to write a letter of recommendation. Just little things like that. Getting those letters written so that they can apply for jobs, making sure that their letters are edited. There's so much to be doing right now.
Very, very good. Very good advice. Yes. And that's a perfect segue into next week's discussion, because next week we are talking about resume building, different tips and different insights, and virtual interviews. And so, just a perfect segue, a natural flow right into next week's segment. We'll be here, same time, same location, right, at 11 a.m. Central Standard Time. And so just want to thank you guys for joining us today. I believe those are all the questions that we do have. I know we had some technical difficulties with our Facebook audience. They said that it was a little bit tough to hear. So we're going to try to see if we can download the Instagram video and maybe put it on to Facebook, or take the actual meeting that we're having with our panelists and just transfer that over to Facebook so that you guys can listen to the full conversation. We do have one more. Okay.
One more
all right.
from our educated audience. Future trend question. Yesterday I was asked, what are future trends for potential employers? How much will recruitment and workplace change, if at all? Social distancing, shortening job week. What are some thoughts?
Oh, wow. Okay. So
maybe that's a Chris question.
Maybe some I don't know. Insights
on our professionals.
So how do you see maybe some trends taking place, or kind of what the other side of the industry is going to look like based on the experience of this COVID-19, whether it's social distancing, maybe it's, I know last week, Chris, we talked about, sustainable materials, more clean materials, trying to produce more of those. Anything additional to that you kind of see coming as a result?
Well, I'll fully admit we're still figuring that out.
Yeah.
But a few of the initial thoughts that we've had specific to the construction industry. So we have some people that are in our office, we have people on our job sites, and we're going to have to keep our distances, where kind of the office trend was to move people a little bit closer together. There wasn't a need for as much space between people. And we're going to see a little bit of that, at least initially, where we're going to have to separate people, maybe stagger when people are coming into the office so that they can keep that distance. And so we may still see, at least in the interim, a period where we have people working from home, in the office, and on the job site, and just trying to keep our separation while we work through COVID-19. And then I think there's a lot of interesting things that we're thinking about right now in terms of I think our senior living communities are being impacted the most with all of this. And so how do we design those to keep the people in those spaces as safe as humanly possible? And how do we keep the airflow within those spaces clean and not sharing that airflow between some of those spaces? So there's a lot of question marks still that we're trying to figure out, but all things that we're running through right now and trying to put together a game plan for.
Very good, very good.
And what about for the relational?
One more?
The relationship side and emotional sense side, like how should people be maybe using some tools to kind of close the gap of the distancing that they feel from a physical standpoint? And maybe some takeaways that they can use to kind of feel still close to others around them.
Well, I've heard that people have been using the telephone more, that they've been reaching out and having a phone conversation, or that if you call somebody, people are actually picking up because they're craving talking to people. So maybe you'll see a shift away from text or email towards telephone, and using your empathy skills and your interpersonal relationship skills, Jennifer already said, asking how somebody is.
Yeah.
You know, what are you struggling with or what's going well, asking about both, and then listening and showing that you're interested.
Very good, very good.
And then to wrap us up, can we find these resources on our Construct Reach app?
Yes, we are going to put those resources into our Construct Reach app. I know Jennifer mentioned some very good resources that she came across, so she's going to send them over to us. We are going to make them available to you guys. Make sure that you are joining the Construct Reach social network because it's an environment, it's a hub, right, where these kind of conversations can actually go past this segment right here, right? And so we're going to provide all of the resources, all of our conversations that have taken place over the last few weeks. After our last discussion and our last panel next week, we're going to upload those as resources for you guys to keep referring to, and just try to be, a resource collectively for you guys to put you in positions to succeed. So thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you to our panelists for joining us today as we talked about mental health. Very good conversation, guys. I appreciate you being involved in this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, take care, guys. Have a good day.
Bye.
Hey.